Good evening and welcome to the first PowerShell meeting of the year 2022. Thanks everybody for joining the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. We're excited to have Anthony Howell with us, the Posh Wolf, and he's going to give us some information about Runway. We'll be using PowerShell to basically help you in that world. And welcome, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about Runway, and I just want to first off, thank you guys for this opportunity. And just before we get into it, I have two things I have to get out of the way. One of them is the disclaimer: I do work for Runway. I started like a month ago. I'm not a salesperson, so this is not a sales pitch. There's a little bit of background there. Runway tracked me down. They found my blog and said, "Hey, we have this cool product. Can we show it to you?" And I said, sure. Took a look at it. I thought it was really, really cool. I was in a bad place with my last job, so I just straight up asked them if they were hiring, and they ended up finding a good fit. Since Runway has some really cool PowerShell, can do some really cool things with PowerShell that I was really excited about, and so here we are, and we're going to be hopefully giving you guys a tool that you can use, and that will actually do something for you. So I'm technically a systems engineer, but the startup is small, so I do a lot of things. I write actions, so those are the actual scripting part of Runway. I work with the dev team to talk about features. I work with users to make sure that they're successful. I write technical documentation. We have a PowerShell Sdk that I built, and I do demos. So that's why I'm here. And then our marketing guy asked me to just say this at the beginning. So Runway is a new startup. The product has been in development for about 2 years now. And so we haven't officially launched yet. Technically, it's what's called stealth mode. But all that means is that we're not doing any big time marketing. There's no secrets here. So you can talk about this. You can, hopefully, you think it's cool, so you tell other people about it. But if not, I would love to know why you don't think it's cool. But we're new to dealing with users of our platform, so any and all feedback is great. And in fact, one of the big reasons I'm here tonight is we're looking for testers. And so if you want to jump into the tool, test it out, tell me why you don't like it or why you do like it, or any new features, all that kind of stuff, that's great. But the really important part here is that Runway has a free community version, and we have no plans to remove that. In fact, that's just built into the product. And currently the free community version limit is at 1,000 endpoints. And if that's abused, we will change that, but that's where it is for now. Okay, so on to just continuing on the introduction. I've got all the links here. So I posted a link in the chat just to this this repository. So I have this just in my sessions repository where I've done all of my other sessions, and you just go to the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. You got this README. You got all these links. So so there's the website, the documentation, and this is this documentation is something that I maintain. So if there's an issue you see in the documentation, let me know about it. I'll reference that as we go a little bit. And then we also have, so Runway uses what we call actions to run scripts. Yeah, find all the typos. If you do find a typo, let me know for sure. And so we have a public repository of those actions, and I'll be going through some of that in this demo. And we also have a PowerShell Sdk. So my background is PowerShell. All the things that Runway does is very strong on the PowerShell side right now, even though it can do a lot of other things. And so I've got a link to the PowerShell Sdk here. With a note that it is an auto-rest generated, I guess we could call it a PowerShell module. Auto-rest calls it an SDK, so I've just kind of picked that up. So it's auto-rest generated, which means it's taken the API definition file and just auto-generated code for that. And so there's a couple of really weird quirks that I haven't worked out yet. So it's on v0.1. So just be aware of that. I'll have some examples using the SDK, and I'll point out the weirdness just so you know about it. Let's dive into what exactly is Runway. So what I want to do is explain what Runway is, show some examples, and then any questions along the way, let me know. I've got the chat window up, so you can throw it in chat, or you can just shout at me and I'll stop, whatever works. So Runway is what Gartner refers to as a service orchestration and automation platform. So essentially, at its core, it just runs code on endpoints, and those endpoints being having an agent on them. And then there's a workflow engine. But what we tell our investors, and this isn't me because I don't deal with the investors, I work with the cool people, is that it's a low-code it is low-code automation and connectivity for hybrid cloud networks. It's a mouthful. And the low-code always scares me when I see that in a product description. And we use that term because you can write scripts in PowerShell, but then in the UI, the script itself is presented just as an action, a card, and I'll show you that. So that's where the low code automation is pretty obvious. Connectivity. So the way the platform is designed is that you can run a chain of actions, and data can be sent between actions, and which means between runners. Runner being the endpoint. Much the same way as like the PowerShell pipeline. So remember, you can pipe data from different commandlets. So in this case, you can also pipe data from different actions, and I'll show those examples. And hybrid cloud networks is just a cool way to say we run anywhere. So anything that has an OS that supports. So automation platform, and my favorite part about Runway is that it is entirely API driven. So the UI, we have a compiled utility, a little executable, and even the SDK, they all use the same API. I love tools that do that. That was one of the big draw-ins for me. And I haven't heard a lot of others that do that, but it makes automating the automation platform easy, so you can get into some meta stuff. But I've even got a diagram down here just to this is very simple, high-level diagram. At Runway Cloud, you got all the different ways to interact with it. So the portal, which is just the UI, the utility, the SDK, and then it talks to all different kinds of runners. So right now we support Linux, Windows, and even containers that are either Linux or Windows. We will be supporting macOS at some point, and we're at the stage where if we have somebody that comes to us, they like the platform and they want a feature, tell us about it. We will prioritize it and make it happen. So that's how we are prioritizing things currently. But Runway, so I talked about running arbitrary code. So tonight, this is PowerShell user group. I love PowerShell, so I'm going to be focusing on PowerShell. So it can run PowerShell scripts, Windows PowerShell, normal PowerShell, even if PowerShell isn't installed. And I'll get to an example and show how that works. But essentially, Runway can run any action on any of its runners, any command on any of the runners that you can run from the command line on that runner. So even if you're like sending like the portable Python executable and then running a Python script, or even the portable PowerShell 7 executable, and then send both that executable and a script, and you can run that script with the executable. So yes, including PowerShell 7. And it also has a job orchestration engine. We'll get into that. And I talked about securely moving data between endpoints, and it does that by routing it through the Runway Cloud. So there's no VPN or direct line of sight connectivity required between two endpoints to do that. And then there's some other features that you can do asset discovery, and it can also self-deploy itself. So it runs as a service, and if that service is running with an account that has like administrative privileges in Active Directory, it can install itself on other Active Directory endpoints. So it's got some really creative deployment methods. And I just want to say that it does not do that automatically. It's not a worm in your system. It's only going to do that if you ask it to. So the first thing I want to start out with is just Azure AD environment. So that is a really good question. So this depends on the runner being able to talk directly to another device. So in Azure AD environments, I'm actually not sure. I don't know the answer to that. So this is where I open my notes, write that down, and I will get the answer to that. This is good. This is why we do these things. Okay. So enrolling a runner. So this is well, actually let's even back up a little bit. So the portal is just portal.runway.host. So if anybody on this call wants to jump in and just sign up for an account right now, feel free to do that. It's a matter of clicking on the enroll as a new user here. So I'm just go ahead and get signed in. And so this is Runway. The first screen you're presented with on login is the devices view. So in this case, I have some devices, and you can see that, like, according to the MAC address, they're very similar. Well, they're all running on my lab server, so they're not a huge environment here. But you actually add in the runner. This is where you have this add endpoints option here in the UI. But one thing to be aware of is that it's Runway is you can add devices to different groups. So by default, when you create an account, you get a home group. And if you were to select like this demo group, I don't have any devices in here, but if I click on this add an endpoint button, this actually will display a bunch of information here. But the important part is it'll give you the command to run to actually install the agent. And this token it generates is specific to the group that you are currently viewing. And so I'm gonna actually just go back to home. So this is where I put all my devices. I don't have a huge number of devices, so I don't have a need to really organize them. So with this command, you notice it's running the Runway command, so it requires the Runway Utility, which you can click on download on this button here, but that downloads the Windows 64-bit. If you need a different version, there is a download button top right-hand corner where you can download 64-bit, 32-bit, or even for Linux, and then run that utility. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that command.
Hey, Anthony, while you're doing that,
yeah.
So since you brought up the concept of groups
Yes.
are for organization, or they have other functions later on, like security and deployment?
Great question. So one of the features that we will have in groups is the ability to control access to different groups. So you can have a group of admins that only has access to one group, and a group of admins that only has access to another group. But right now, it's only used for organizational purposes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of what I'll mention tonight is future features. So remember, early startup, not all the features are here yet. So good question. Thank you, Mike. So I already have the Runway utility downloaded. So it's just it's literally just a compiled utility that can talk to the API. So it's got a bunch of different commands. I'm not going to run through everything here. One of the big ones is Runway Who. This just tells you if you're logged in or not. I'm already logged in. I don't have to worry about it. But if I just take that command that I pulled out of the portal and just straight run it, it will the utility actually will install the runner for you. And in my case, the runner's already installed. So my laptop is called Mobile Wolf, and you can see that it is right here in the screen. So there's some if I remove my asset and re-add it, it screws up some other things that I have set up for the demo, so I didn't want to run through that. But everything I just did, because it's all API driven, you can do with the SDK. So using the SDK, so it's called PS Runway. So I didn't actually think to put the commands to install it. So it's just install module PS Runway. If we look at the GitHub link up further, there's just information on how to install it and authenticate. And because it's an auto-rest generated module and it requires one to know C# fairly well to set up the authentication, it's got a very basic requirement for authentication. So invoke RW login authentication, takes an email and password, and then it gives you a session token. You have to assign that token to your Runway session token environmental variable, and then the module or PS Runway will take that variable and add it to the authorization header and keep you authenticated that way. And so I can I've already logged in. So I can just do get RW runner just to make sure that it still has, yeah, so the session's still working for me. And then to actually get those downloads, it's just get RW content public download. There's going to be some strange names, and that's just how Autorest works. And I will go on the record and say that the module is going to get better, and I'm going to point out a lot of different issues that it has. But then to actually get like the Windows 64-bit, I'm filtering by platform in this script, and then actually downloading it. And I've already got it downloaded, so I'm not going to do that again. But then if you want to put it in a specific group besides the default, you can just get RW group. And actually, this is another quirk with the API. So if you do a get command that returns an array of items, like get RW group, the standard output tells you just how many, even though it actually does return the items in the items property. So if I do get RW group, just go to items, that's where it actually has the groups. And it's just one of the quirks that will be getting better. So it's just, yeah, it's a kind of an annoyance right now. And then you can generate a token with the new enrollment session commandlet, give it an expiration date. So in this case, I did 1 hour. Tell it whether or not it's a one-time use. And this is not required, but if you want to assign it to a specific group, give it the group ID and set the type. So in this case, I'm installing a persistent runner. There are other types not applicable to the conversation tonight, and they're also not documented yet. But for the most part, it's going to be persistent runners, and a persistent runner being a runner that's installed as a service on a device. So if I actually just run this command and just look at the token, it actually gives me that enrollment token I could then use to run Runway install. So this is just really emphasizing that the SDK lets you do everything because everything's API based. So it's amazing in that regard. So let's run a quick job. And just so you guys know, everything that's in italics is just a reminder for me to do something. So create a job in the portal. So that's what we're going to do. So in the portal, so I have my devices here. If I select, and actually let's talk about filters really quick. So right now I have a filter active up here in the filter bar. If I clear that out, you notice there's some more devices here. So Runway has an asset discovery feature, and I've run that in my network, so it shows all of those devices here. And if I want to just get devices that have runners on them, I can use the runner count filter and just say equal to 1. And yes, we do support multiple runners on the same device. We haven't heard a good use case yet, but we can do that. So if you want to run multiple runners on the same device with like different service accounts or something, you can do that. I haven't seen a good use case for it, but we could do that. So you can also tag devices. So if I wanted to add like an Active Directory tag to my domain controller, I can do that. And then I come up here and I can just say Active Directory, and then I would only see my Active Directory devices. So you can get really granular with tagging and even make your own tags here. You don't have to use any of the pre-canned ones.
That multiple runner thing sounds very much like WebGL in the sense that like depending who you connect as determines what you can do. So that would be an interesting concept.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you could even, and I know this is supported, is you could even put multiple runners on the same device that each have different service accounts, and they are each reporting to a different group in Runway.
That's where I was going. I was going to suggest that we do that in the regard of different product, but different using RBAC rules for different groups, and so there are different. Basically, it's a remote control, and so different groups have access to different machines, and so depending upon what machines you have, you get a runner or you get a remote control agent on every machine. So a machine can have 5 agents because 5 different groups can remote into you, and only those machines can So
nice.
That's what's controlled.
Nice. Well, that's cool. So I mean, Runway supports that. I haven't seen a use case for that yet, but I'm writing that down. Thank you. So I can select multiple devices here just using Shift and Control. I'm gonna select all my Windows devices, and on the side here we have a create a job option. So if I hit create a job, this takes me to the job creation screen. So this is where the low code part of Runway comes into play, and we'll get into the actual, I don't know, you could call it high code part of it, where we write a script here just a little bit. So here in the center, this is the job canvas where I can add actions to it. And down below is all the devices that are assigned currently. And I can edit the assignments here. That's a little easier on the other screen, so that's why I like to use the other screen. And then bottom right-hand side, this is where I have all the actions. And right now, in this current version, they aren't all tagged. So typically, like if I click the Active Directory tag, I've got some actions I've put in here that are tagged, so I can actually filter. And I only have 7 instead of 100. We will be getting everything tagged and make this easier to filter. It's not there right now. And I'll walk through how to make an action, how to tag it. But what I want to do is just run just a really simple action here. So I have an inventory software action I wrote. All this does, and I'll show you the code, is check the uninstall keys and return all the software that's installed on a device. So I'm just going to hit create job. Or actually, before I do, we have the schedule option. And by default, it's scheduled to run now. You can run it once in the future or run it periodically if you want it as well. And we'll run through a periodic job here in a bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and save run now and create job. So this, whoa. Okay, sorry guys, I forgot to clean this up before starting. That is my bad. So this created an actionable grouse. I'm going to delete these other jobs. So this might be a little foreshadowing of what we're going to be doing here in a little bit. But the really cool part about Runway is that it has already completed that job on all 5 runners in the time it took me to delete those extra jobs. And this is what I really liked about Runway compared to other tools that I've used. And I'm speaking from from the standpoint of when I was like demoing Runway before I even thought about joining. Is so in the back end of Runway is a Kubernetes cluster, and that maintains an active WebSocket to every single runner. And so that allows the backend to kick off that script almost instantaneously. And so we've already finished on 5 of 5. And yes, yeah, Dennis, I totally agree. That is very cool. That's one of the things that I really like about it. It's really like a forward-thinking way to design a system. And so, but the point of running a script to get, list out the software inventory isn't just to run the script. We actually want to be able to get the results. So, but before we do that, let me, I wrote this down to keep myself on track. So we ran the job. So this is just a little flow chart of what happens with the job. So you have the Runway cloud here, the first row, the second row is the runner. Job is created. The action is initiated on the runner. It checks to see if the action is cached. And so every time it runs an action, it will cache that in case it has to run it again, and it'll download if it doesn't have it. And the action will create results. So in Runway, we call the results anything that the script creates drops into the results folder. And I'll get into the results here in a second. And then it caches those results, and the action is complete, and the job is complete. And now you notice there's nothing in here about the results going somewhere or being uploaded to Runway. So one of the architectural decisions with, oh, David, that's a really good question. No, it is not currently encrypted. I'm writing that down. Now the cache is stored. Oh, here, let's just take a look where it's stored. So it's in program files, Runway, and then the ID of the runner, and then we have the results cache. They're all, it's all stored here, and you can see I've run a bunch of jobs on my device. And it's not encrypted, no. But I'm gonna write that down and bring that up with the developers. And it's zip file. But here, let me get back on track here. Thank you for the question, though. I welcome them. So the results for each action are action specific. So it's whatever the action wants them to be. So, but technically, they're really any file that the action drops in the results folder when the action executes. And Runway doesn't store any of the action results. That's the really important part to take away here. And that was a design decision to support some like forensics use cases where you might legally not be able to share results data with anything external. And so they're zipped and cached on the runner, but they can be routed with a connector, and I'll talk about a connector here in a minute. But let's I'm gonna kind of skip around here. Well, I shouldn't say kind of skip around here. I'm gonna take a little sidetrack. I just want to show you this script. So an action in Runway is literally requires only one thing, and that's a manifest file. And this manifest tells the runner, so the runner is the agent, tells it what to do. And in this case, on Windows, you give it a run_win. If I wanted this to support Linux, I would say run_lin, and then add a command that could be run on Linux. So if Linux had, PowerShell 7 on it, or I, dropped the portable PowerShell, I could. I'll show you the Linux example. This is purely Windows right now.
So if you do
but in this case,
that one, sorry, if you do that there, it'll run on both. This action will run on either, and it'll just using different commands to run it.
Exactly.
Okay, so it can do it, but it's not. It can even just run a bash at this point. On a Linux, this action just does different actions, but this is what it want to do. You want to get installed software, so this way on that way, and that way on the other way.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's exactly the idea with the way this is designed. So if you had an action that would run on multiple operating systems, you just need obviously different scripts, but you can do that. And I have an example where I actually have that. So I'll show that here in a minute, or it might be a few minutes. But so in this case, it's just calling the get installed software.ps1. So that's this script right here. It's fairly straightforward. It's looking at the uninstall keys in the registry and looking at both the current user and local machine, and it does some cool things, pulls out some data, and it writes some output, and this is cool because I'll show you where you can see it in Runway, and it does some filtering to finally get all the applications that are actually installed. And I'm not going to get into this logic here. We can, if someone's interested, I can talk more about this another time. But then I'm taking what I find. Oh, I will remember to repeat the questions that I see in the chat, Steve. I appreciate that. But then I'll take what I find and put it in the results folder as this CSV file. So I'm using the name of the computer -installed SW for installed software. And so this is how it creates those results. So back in the UI, so if I click on the job, it takes me back to where I can look at the job. And down below we have all of our runners that it's assigned to. So so here's my mobile wolf. If I click on this, this little page icon, this will actually show me all the output from that job. So you can see that it searched through Windows conversion uninstall and WoW64, the uninstall, and it found unfiltered 109. It does some filtering to actually get the ones that are actually installed. And there's 46 applications on my laptop. And so to actually get the job results, this is where we can manually download them as one option. And this isn't what you should be doing a lot with Runway, but I want to show you how to do it so you can see the results. So I click on this download button right side of the job. It gives me this download command using the utility. Let's go ahead and copy that and just run it right in here. Oh, and the download command does require you to be authenticated to Runway, which I already am. And you can always verify that with Runway who. Nice. Cool. So I run that download command. It's actually it's pretty quick, but I want to show you just with a diagram what it actually does. Oh wow, this image got much bigger here. So top row is the Runway utility, center row is the cloud, bottom row is the runner. So you run the Runway download command, and it tells the cloud to get all of the runners that ran that job. And then the cloud reaches out to each of the runners and says, hey, give me that job from your cache. It uploads it to the cloud and then routes it down to your device. So it's never actually stored in Runway. It's just transient through there. So if we now go to, so it creates a download folder in the working directory. So I'm working out of my downloads. And you can see I've done this quite a bit. But this job here, job folder, this is where it downloads all of the results. So if I look at like the domain controller, there shouldn't be extract here. So inside of that zip file is that CSV, and it is probably going to be like two things. Oh, See, I'm so used to PowerShell 7 not requiring the no type information. I totally forgot about that. But yeah, there's only Edge installed on my domain controller, as an example. But again, like that Runway just manually downloading the results doesn't make a lot of sense, and so that's where we have the idea of connectors. So a connector is an action that runs on a dedicated runner, and it runs once for every runner assigned to the job, and it will it's designed to grab the results from each job and then do something with them. And a good example is the download file connector. And this is another. I'm actually going to vary a little bit from the script here. I wrote a PowerShell one because the original download file connector is Python, and I wanted to show you guys the code. And showing Python code in a PowerShell user group didn't sound like a good idea. So, and I don't like Python anyway. So I'm going to select my 5 devices here. I'm going to create another job. Mike, did you have a question?
No, later. I'll hit you later with it.
Okay. And so I'm going to do the same thing to where I'm going to grab my software inventory action, and then so I misnamed this the first time, so I call it download 80 results, and I haven't fixed the name. So pretend like it says download results instead of 80 results. And so this job itself is a connector, and over in the navigation bar is where you actually configure the connectors. And I've created a connector here. And actually, let's just go through the add connector. So this is where you configure the connector with the action, and I'll show you the code to actually tell it that the action is a connector instead of just a normal action. And so we have the download 80 results. And so remember, a connector runs on a specific runner, so you actually tell it which runner to run on. So I'm going to run it here on my laptop so we get it. And then you give it a name, and typically you want to give it a DL results. You want to give it a name that's specific to where the data is going. So I'm putting in the name of my device here. And this action has a parameter, and the parameter is, in this case, the path. So I'm going to put in the path here that I've pre-prepared and save that. So download results to Mobile Wolf. So now if we go back, so I'm going to select the same devices again, create a job, grab my inventory software and my connector. And this is where the low code comes into play, like I mentioned before, in that you have one action, which is represented by the card here, and then the connector, which is represented by a card. And the easiest way that I like to think about these is just comparing it to the PowerShell pipeline. So you have everything that's going from inventory software into this download 80 results action. And so if I go ahead and just create this job, what it will do, and I forgot to explain what it would do, is it will take all the results from inventory software and download them to this folder on my device. So if I go to C, Runway results, 80 stuff. So this is the test run from earlier. Let's go ahead and delete them. And I'm going to go ahead and just click on Create Job. And there we get Right Alpaca. And I always forget to rename the jobs. The naming engine uses an adjective followed by some sort of animal. And so you get some really funny names sometimes. But if we hit refresh, you can see it's already running on 5 endpoints. And we should see the data popping in here in a sec. There we go. Bam. So that is what a connector is for. And just to kind of explain like what exactly a connector does, I like diagrams. So here's the diagram. This helps me understand it. So hope it helps you understand it. So the first action completes, and then the connector action is initiated, and it does the same is action cached, and it downloads it if it's not. Oh, and I should also mention that this is for each assigned runner, this connector runs. So if I assigned that previous job to 5 runners, so it's going to run 5 times. So on each time it runs, it requests, so it retrieves the previous action results by requesting it from the Runway Cloud. Runway Cloud reaches out to that to that specific runner in this case, and says, "Hey, give me your results." It gets uploaded to the Runway Cloud, and it's routed back down to the connector, and then the connector does something with it. And in this case, it will extract it and drop it in that 80 stuff folder, and then the connector action is complete, at least for that run. And I just wanted to clarify like how the action chain works, because when you have a job that is action 1, 2, and then a connector, it doesn't. The way it works is that it sends that entire job to each runner, and so the runner will go action 1, 2, and then the connector runs on the connector, and then each of the runners does the same thing. So there's no. So if one of the runners is slower than the other, like the rest of the runners will just leave it behind, and hopefully it'll eventually catch up, right? And this connector action will run once for each of the runners. And the way this is a diagram I used to. Oh yeah, this is a diagram I just used to just explain how the results, the pipeline. We'll call it a pipeline because I like that example. That's what I'm familiar with. This is how the pipeline works. So if you have, let's say you have a job with 3 actions and a connector. So action 1 runs and it has no previous results. Action 2 runs and it can download the action 1 results. Action 3 runs and it can download action 2 results. But on the runner, like it can only access results from the actions that have completed on that runner. And the connector, on the other hand, it can download all action 3 results from all runners. And so that's where the idea is to be able to collect all that data and then compile it. And one of the use cases we have, and if we go back to creating a job, is we're working on setting up an easy way to send the data to an Elasticsearch server, to where you can run a job that produces some sort of result, and instead of presenting it in Runway, because we've made the architectural decision not to do that, set up just a one-click deploy to set up an Elasticsearch server to be able to send your results to the Elastic and then look at them, or look at the results by job or by runner, all that good stuff. And so that's something that's being worked on. It's not an existing feature, but it's worth mentioning because it's something that I'm excited about.
And that's something you kind of led up to what I was thinking about a little bit, which was you started off, and I get all this, and it's great, and I love what I see, but I almost feel like, because we're a PowerShell group and we were talking prior to the recording starting, that there may be some assumed knowledge here, right? So, and maybe it's just me not being on point, but you're basically saying here that we've built a tool that's so lightweight and so fast and dynamic. We're the antithesis of Intune or SCCM, where we don't need to run jobs on some regular schedule, pull all that data back and build a database so that you can have that data at your fingertips, because normally that'd be super slow. We've built a tool that allows you to run a job basically on fly, immediately, touch all the machines, super lightning quick, run your code, and it's sitting there on the machines. And then if you want, we can pull that data back to a machine, or that data is sitting on each endpoint for you to grab. But the whole idea being that this system is completely dynamic. There's no need to pre-populate stuff, because we're not this big behemoth thing that takes hours to generate data and get all the results back.
That's a great way to phrase it. Oh, you broke up there, Mike.
Someone might be wondering, why do I need to run their jobs all the time? And I think that the idea that this is so fast and nimble. That's its strength. So rather than rely on any cached results, well, you don't want an asset list of software that was run 18 hours ago. I can give it to you in 3 minutes. And it is a comprehensive list of the entire environment. So because of that, we're going to do it on the fly whenever you require. It's almost like a peer-to-peer network, except that the nodes aren't really talking to each other. It's central to each node, right? But it's that fast, right?
Yeah. And then I think, Mike, you're really getting at the things that I was most impressed. I've worked with SCCM and Intune and Endpoint Manager and even some other tools, and it's kind of like I'm going to run a script and then I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
And in some cases, in smaller networks, I was able to set up a script that just uses background jobs to just multi-thread and just remote into everything and just get it in it. But even that takes a while. And that depends on having line of sight network connectivity to everything. And that doesn't exist anymore, at least in the places I've worked at recently.
And so the other thing I wanted to ask you, because we are recording this and people are looking at the visual representation of your tool, this is a web form and Anthony's presenting, and I'm assuming you probably have this zoomed up a little bit. So this display probably looks a little big and cluttered. And if you were on a big fat monitor and zoomed out, you have a much more big workspace.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike.
Yeah. So it's not this cluttered, tight interface that you have to work in. He's doing that for the benefit of the presentation for us.
Yeah, so this is what it looks like at 100% zoom instead of 100. I think it was at 150.
Yeah, that might not come across to people watching at home. That
thank you.
We zoom up. Yeah,
I forget about that as well. Okay. So we talked about the action chain, showed the results.
So Anthony, there were a couple of questions earlier. Dan asked a question about, and David, for that matter, both had a question about when you lose network connectivity.
I'm sorry, I totally missed that. So that's a great question. So if a job is queued up, so let's look at the devices screen. So you can see right here that out of my 7 runners, looking at this icon here in the runners column, the green ones indicate that it's online. The yellow indicates that it's offline. So if my Elastic 01, if I were to assign a job to that runner, it won't run because the runner doesn't know about it, and in fact that runner's turned off. But as soon as that runner comes online, that's when it checks in, and it will see if there's any jobs in the queue for that runner. Let's see. Does agent cache output retry? So I am so David, just on your question, does the agent cache output and retry when losing internet connection? I'm actually not sure what happens if internet connection is. I'm writing this down so I remember to find the answer to it. When the internet connection is dropped while the action is executing, I am not sure what happens. I'm gonna write that down and get the answer to that. Okay. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Did I miss any other questions? Can Runway work offline or is entirely cloud reliant? So yeah, it is entirely cloud reliant. But I do want to say that we have designed the system. So if I click on the add endpoints, you notice that the install command has this -s parameter and it points to the portal here. We have designed the system with the intent of in the future setting up to be hosted in your own cloud so that you don't have to worry about routing traffic through the Runway cloud. You could put it in Azure, you could put it in AWS, or I don't know, do people put things in GCP? I don't know. And so that's where you could set this up to be your own URL, your own hosted. It's on the roadmap. I don't have a date on that, but if we had a customer that said, hey, we need this today, I'm sure we could make it happen.
Or just even an appliance that you could run internally that you don't have to even go to the cloud at all. You could run the services as an appliance.
Yeah, Yeah.
Because I have some clients who do that. It's just, hey, here is our cloud hosted appliance as a VMDK, and you can run it this way.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. I'm gonna write that down.
Do you have this? I want you to finish writing. I don't want you to lose your question.
Oh, I got it.
Okay. Does the system have any intelligence to sort of protect against someone who's kind of not written the most optimized code and doesn't want to overwhelm the runner on the remote system? So I write some PowerShell code, but it's not the most efficient. And here I am. I just max out the CPU on that box with some crappy code.
So Mike, that is a great question. I'm really glad you brought it up because I didn't have that anywhere in the presentation. So I am not very familiar with the controls, but I am told that, because I haven't actually tested this, I probably should just write a script that just kills the CPU and see what happens. But supposedly, and I say that like I'm not sure. So the runner is designed to limit the amount of resources that are used. I'm not sure exactly how those controls are implemented, but it is designed in such a way that it would never be noticeable to a user of the device, or a service running on the device. If it's like a server or something, it would never have any impact on that device, a normal function on that device. Oh, sorry, you broke up there, Mike. What was that?
Guilty. We're all under the understanding that you are at a startup and you guys are writing features into this stuff. We're hitting you from corporate backgrounds and asking you about every feature that's come along in every other baked product, right? So
Yep.
It's cool, man. We totally get it. It's a really cool product.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I'm doing this as a Q&A because of things that I haven't thought of, right? So yeah, that feature is in it. I don't know enough about it to explain exactly how it works. But I'm gonna try it out and see what happens. Okay. So getting back on here, so let's look at the code for that download file connector, or sorry, download results. Let me bring that up here. Nope, that is this repository. Here we go. Okay, so and this is another script I'm going to get into here in just a little bit. So that action is a little more complicated action. Oh, here's another question. Can the Runway utility be run on multiple endpoints, or do you need a unique download for each endpoint? The utility is not unique. So you can copy the exe however many times you want. Yeah, there is no nothing specific until it gets installed. And even then it installs its utility isn't installed. The utility installs the runner. If that makes sense. Oh, here we go. So Bob is on this call as well. He's one of the founders. He just texted me to say that there is with no uncertainty, there is a feature to control the amount of CPU, RAM, and disk I/O with the runner. Okay.
Open to coming off mic, and you can talk too.
Well, I mean, is there any other information we need about that? He's not the technical guy.
Oh, we're good.
Okay. Okay. So this download 80 results is a connector, and it has some additional features that you can put in an action. So every action has to have a manifest. You could literally have an action that just has a manifest, and it runs like I don't know, you could say run when, and you're saying ipconfig, and then you're piping it to /results, and then ipconfig.txt or whatever. You could do that as an action. But in this case, it's running the download 80 results PowerShell script. But there are some other things I want to point out. So it has a parameters.json file. And so this is how you tell the script that it needs parameters. So if we look back in the UI, so go back to Runway, we're going to go to our jobs, and we'll look at our write alpaca job. So this download 80 results has a parameter, and so it's defined in JSON inside of the action in the parameters.json file. And I'm going to get to this question after this really quick. So in the documentation, so docs.runway.host, all this is documented. So on the left-hand side, just scrolling down to the action developer guides, components, and looking at the parameters, this has more details about the parameters, the required values in there and whatnot. So I just wanted to point that out because a lot of what I'm saying is documented. Okay, question about the download utility. While I understand the download icon in the upper right corner allows you to download utility from multiple OS, why doesn't the center one bring the same page instead of download the Windows version? Okay, so Dan, that's a question that I've actually asked myself. So why doesn't let me just bring up the UI here. So why doesn't this add endpoints bring up, or this download option here bring up the multiple downloads? That was a UI decision. I don't have a good reason for that. That's just what was decided. That's probably back. The Windows runner came first, or the Windows utility, and then the Linux utility was added. So I'm just guessing that was just why it was decided. I mean, I know that's not very exciting, but that's why. Okay, cool. Yeah. So for the recording, he just said makes sense. Just wondering. Okay. So we're defining a parameter here, giving it a name, a type. So type 0 is string. You can do string, numbers. Well, let's look at the documentation. I don't remember all the other ones. So there's type, string, numbers, and booleans. There's a fourth one that I haven't added in here, but you can also do passwords, and that just has some. It's not encrypted. That feature, passing secrets, is a feature that's coming, but the password just keeps the password from being displayed. Is all.
So eventually you'll support the PS credential object?
Yes.
Good answer.
So I'm gonna. Sorry, I was thinking about that. So, there is a plan, and a plan to add the capability of using encrypted secrets, and it makes perfect sense to also transition that into supporting credential objects, PS credential objects.
Okay.
And the really cool part about being a Powershell guy and working for a startup like this is that they ask me what I think would be cool, and I think that's cool. So, okay. So declaring the parameter, and we also have the capability of putting tags on the action, and this part isn't connector specific. So if we go back to the UI, we go back to jobs, we look at our job here, right alpaca, and so there's tags here above the action. So I have 100 actions in here, and if I want to filter them, I can only filter them by tags. So I click on like the Active Directory tag. Now I have the Active Directory, actions. And you notice that those are just an array, a JSON array here, and tags in the repository.json. You also tell it what language it is, and that. So back in the UI, that shows up at the bottom of the card. I don't remember why it says Watcher and Forks. There's a reason for that. I don't remember what that is. But if we switch back, and then a description if you wanted. So this is the repository.json. And again, in the documentation, in the action developer guide components repository, it goes more into some of that. And then the execution.json file. This is the file that declares the action as a connector. And it's not really intuitive, but that's what it does. And there's this affinity value. So we plan on supporting connectors that not only run on runners, but they also can run in a hosted container in the Runway cloud. So it'll spin up a container, it'll run your connector, and I mean, same whatever the script is. But right now, it only supports running the action on the runner itself. So while you can set the affinity to different values, and the values aren't documented, but they will support other places to run the code, It doesn't actually do anything currently. And then require connection, that just, I don't remember what that does. I will make sure it gets in the documentation though. But if you use this execution.json with affinity1 require connection true, this will turn it to a connector. And the script itself is fairly simple. So the settings.json file, so every time the action is initiated, the runner puts all of the execution specific data in the settings.json file. So I don't have an example here locally, but in the documentation, I have an example here. So it includes, let me zoom this in just a little more. So it includes some, the runner's ID, the thread ID, job ID, a bunch of different IDs, and they're all explained down below. But if you pass a parameter to the action, let me just scroll down here, the parameter will also show up in the settings.json file. So in this case, we have a netstat inventory that will actually have a use filter and IP filter parameters. So this is how they show up in the settings.json. So in this action, it has a parameter, and the parameter's name is path. So exactly this name is the property in the settings.json file. So I'm getting the content of that, converting it from JSON, and then I output it just for debug purposes. And then let's see. So I am creating the out folder, and then I'm doing a Runway download. And so remember, I mentioned that Runway supports different hosts. I mean, we don't actually have any different hosts. So the settings.json also tells you where the host is, the Runway cloud is that's requesting the action execution. And so best practice is you always pass that in with the -s parameter into the utility. But I'm doing the download command, and you notice there's no job ID or anything. The utility is built in such a way that it implicitly knows when it's running inside of an action or a job. And so if we look at, I'm going to scroll back up here. So if we look at this screen, so if I were to run Runway download in action 2 on runner 1, all it would do is grab the results from action 1. You don't have to tell it anything else. And then on the connector, if I run Runway download, for whichever runner it's executing for on behalf of, it will grab the results from that runner. And so it just makes it, oh, whoops, sorry, my dog's here, and I just stepped on his paw. All right, he's okay. And so the only other parameter I'm using is the -- directory, which tells it to download just to a subdirectory, which is just /out. And then for each of those zips, I'm just expanding them, and I'm putting them into the path. So whatever value is passed into that path parameter. And then in the case of the example we looked at, it was this folder. So C Runway results /80 stuff. So that's where it dropped those. But just a quick note here. So I have the Runway executable. It's referencing that it's in the Windows folder. And so if we look in the Windows folder, I just have this .runway file. This is just an empty file of nothing. And I don't like storing executables in my Git repositories. So I leave this .runway in the Windows folder, and then during the deployment of this action, it will actually go through and replace all .runway files with the Runway utility. So it automatically does that. So you can see that any .runway file that's in a Windows folder gets replaced with runway.exe, and it will actually it'll cache it and then replace it and then build the action. So just to save some space in my Git repositories. Does that connector make sense? Any questions on that? I mean, this is a really simple example of what a connector can do. I mean, you could do crazy things, like you could download all the files and then pack them into a database, or send them to Elastic. I mentioned that, all kinds of things. Send them to a syslog server if you needed. Oh, So the SDK. So like I said, a PowerShell guy. When I saw it had an API, I knew it also needed a PowerShell module. So we built the SDK, and I've got a repository, and this is a public repository. Oh no, I wanted to open that in a new tab. So this is a public repository I put together, and the idea with this repository, let me go back here to my notes, is one of the big things that I've always used PowerShell for is writing scripts that just run as scheduled tasks in Windows. So I've always ended up with a few scripts on every domain controller that is a scheduled task, and it like cleans up stale accounts or checks Active Directory health, all that kind of thing. So Runway, you can schedule scripts, and if you have a runner on domain controller, you can do that. Ouch. And so I wanted to show you how two things. One, that you can schedule like these kind of scripts through Runway, and two, you can actually store those actions and the configuration for those jobs in Git and sync them to Runway using PowerShell. So this is a public repository. You're welcome to take a look at it. There's a link here in the README for this session. But actually, I'm going to open up in VS Code. So I've got two actions. Well, I've got three actions. We already covered the. Oh, see, I missed. So when Mike, when you said "ouch," I thought you were referring to something I said, but now I see the don't install this product in Canada. You'll get a runaway process. Nice. Okay, so I already covered this download 80 results. I wrote this action specifically for this repository, but I have two actions underneath my 80 folder. One that finds stale computers, one that finds stale users in Active Directory specifically. So let's just take a look at these. These are pretty simple. Manifest refers to the script in the Windows folder. They both take parameters. So in this case, there's three parameters. The script will find users that haven't logged in for at least 90 days. So this is the default value of this parameter. So if they don't put in a value, this is what they'll get. Got a question here. For sending data to something like Elastic Influx, I'm assuming I need to properly format the data in line protocol syntax. They have two versions, standard and plain. I'm not familiar with what line protocol syntax is, but yes, with Elastic, I have a small amount of familiarity with Elastic over the last couple of weeks, and yeah, you would need to format it in a way that Elastic can accept. Yeah, you're welcome, Leonard. But yeah, Stephen, if you want to follow up with me on, I don't know what line protocol syntax is, but I'm happy to hear some more about that and talk about it some more. Okay, so then this action also has created before, so it's only considering accounts that were created at least this many days ago. So in this case, 2 weeks. Mem. Oh yeah. So yeah, Stephen, you would have to format that. So in the script, you could format that, or if whatever application you're sending data to, if it has some sort of maybe a little utility that automatically formats data, you can ship that utility with the action and call that utility if you wanted. But Clam for scheduling doesn't support cron-based definitions. That is one of the things that I asked, and it does not currently support cron-based definitions. I'm actually going to write that down. The difference between me asking about features and people that are other people that are asking about features is that whatever you guys ask about is always much more important than whatever I ask about. And the reason being is that the potential customer versus the employee, right? And I'm not a salesperson, so I don't see you guys as potential customers, just to be clear. Yeah, community-driven development. Yes, Glenn, I agree. Okay, Let me get back to the script. So this is pretty basic still user script. So I have a function that I've used for years. It takes two parameters, the same parameters that we saw before. It builds a filter, and then it get AD user based on that filter, and that filter being last logon timestamp is before the no logon converted to file time, and then it returning additional properties if you need them. And so this script then will of course load the settings.json so it can get the parameters and then output them for debug, and then get all the stale users. So no login since it's passing the no login parameter, and created before passing the created before parameter, and then doing some output to say how many it found, and then for each of those moving them to the disabled OU. And one thing you'll notice here in my parameters is I have a TBD for the default value for disabled OU. In testing this, I realized that if you have a 2-week-old Active Directory lab, you don't have any stale users. So, yeah. So I won't actually be able to run this and produce any meaningful data, unfortunately. But what I wanted to do is I was thinking about, if I was in an environment where I wanted to run this, the idea with using Runway is that I would be able to, I don't have to go to the device to do the things, to run the scripts. So I don't want to log on the device, and I want to be able to log local, or log in a place that I can access it without having to remote to the DC. And so I'm creating the results. I'm using still users underscore date string. So I'm building out a date string with this format. So like we can run this really quick, and you can see the 22-01-05 and then the time. Now I'm UTC -8, so that's why it's only 6:30 here. And then and the connector. So remember the connector we already used to put those CSVs in a folder. I designed the connector in such a way that we could have these CSVs and then dump them on a file share and just have them there to access if you need them. Or if you wanted to leave them on the endpoint, well, that's fine. You can get them later. So that's what that does. And does it support the concept of a dry run, where you could schedule a runner job to then use what if to preview before it actually deletes the stale users? So Clem, that is a great question. And it supports it if you write it like that. So what I mean is that we could come in here into the parameters and say, just copy this parameter and say name what if, and then type 2 for Boolean, default value false, and then cool. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Have a good evening. That's for the recording. That is Greg saying goodbye. So we could so Clem, we could add in a what if parameter here, and then in the script we can say, instead of get 80 stale users. So this commandlet doesn't support what if, but we could say switch, and I'm going to really go fast here. What if, and then we can say if. So we could say if it contains what if, then do get 80 user dash what if. And then up here, we could even say, if settings dot what if, then what if. So you can design the actions that way. It's just with the flexibility of Runway. I mean, it's not built into it, but I would expect that if I spent time with some of these actions, that's the kind of thing, that's a great way to write an action to add a what if, and then you run it, and you could even say with the what if, so it's going to get 80 user what if. Well, actually, sorry, this is a get 80 user. There's no, I don't think there's a what if on get 80 user. I'm going crazy. So actually, instead of if settings dot what if, we would do that here. So clean them up. So we say here, we'd say if settings dot what if. Sorry, guys. If settings dot what, well, we wouldn't want to do this. What if there, else, bam, if settings dot what if for each user in stale users, write host user.sam account name. And you probably want to put more details in there to actually, be able to identify the user, maybe like distinguished name or something. And then if you actually run the action with the what if, then it doesn't actually clean up any users. It will just simply do remove 80 object has what if. Nice. Right host, come on, man. So that is a good point. Right host, yeah, not best practice, but I'm actually using right host here specifically because it's not ever muted, so it will always show up in the in the UI. So if we go back here, we look, and if this job has completed, I can click on this icon and actually see what's written here. It actually gets any outputs if you do write output. Right host is fine at PS7. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I'm doing it intentionally. Okay, does the SDK provide module dependency handling, or is that something that needs to be handled in the action script? For example, if the action uses DBA tools or import Excel modules. That's a really good question. So you'll notice in this example, I'm using get user. I don't have to do anything else because well, if this ran on a device that didn't have the Active Directory module, it would fail. And so there is no built-in dependency handling. So that would.
So that falls back on how the module or the script is written and whether you have the dependency listed in your script file.
Yes. So so if I were to just run this script normally, that's exactly how it's going to run on the endpoint. However, you could write an action that the action literally is just install modules, and it has a text box for comma separated list of modules to install. You run that action, it installs the modules, and then the next action does something that requires those modules. So what about the AZ module for Azure stuff? Does that need to be called as an import in the PowerShell script? So if it works without importing normally, then no, it does not. And was it PowerShell 3 that implemented the auto imports of modules? So as long as it's in the module paths, it'll work. So if you guys have any other questions on that, just let me know. Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Cool. So let's see. Okay, so we were talking about the get 80 stale users. So these are really good comments. I really appreciate it, guys. I'm actually I'm thinking that I'm just gonna remember everything, but I know I won't. So I'm gonna write some of that down. What if module dependencies? Okay, it's a good idea to call import module anyway, just to cover your butt. It's not needed, but edge cases are dragons. Edge cases are dragons. Yeah, that is a really good point. It's like using the full command name instead of aliases, right? Good, best practice. Okay, so I have these actions, and okay, so I have these actions, and to actually publish them, this is where I just use a GitHub workflow. Ooh, still needing to support PS2. I'm sorry, but hey, I did forget to mention that the Runway Runner is supported all the way back to XP Service Pack 2, and it's supported back that far because it's written in C++. That was not something that I was expecting, but it's incredible. And that means that it has very few dependencies and it's very small and light. So yeah, I know and reading the reactions here, this is exactly my thoughts. It's crazy. So to actually publish the actions, you first got to get the Runway executable, and I have it stored in Azure Blob. I did show the example of downloading it with the SDK. I could do that, but I'm not I didn't write that script to download it. If I wrote that script to download with the SDK after writing this this YAML. So I'm downloading the executable, and I'm running the replace executables PowerShell script. So remember, that'll replace, excuse me, this .runway with runway.exe, the executable. And then I'm authenticating to Runway. So with the Runway utility, you authenticate with the login command, give it a user, give it a password. And then, so on a PR, I don't actually publish it, but on a push, I run the publish command. So let's take a look at this really quick. This is pretty straightforward. It takes a relative path parameter, and in the script, it tells it that all the actions are in the actions folder. So if I look back in the publish script, it's getting all the manifests and assuming that each of those manifests are actions, because the manifest is the only required file in an action. And then for each of those, it builds out the name and it looks at the folder structure. And so it calls the stale computers AD:stale computers. And then it will actually publish them. So if test is present, then it will build it, but not publish it. And otherwise, the build command, so runway build -it takes, I don't know what IT stands for, but it takes the manifest file, the path to the manifest file, and then -o is the name of the built runway action, which is literally just a zip file, but they call it apt for some reason. And then -p tells it to publish it with whatever name that you pass to the -t parameter. So in this case, the namespace, again, I'm using the folder structure, so AD:stale computers, and it's doing that with these two lines here. And then the last thing that I wanted, and let me even back up a little bit further. So this YAML, this is public. If you want to build your own actions and just copy this, great, do it. It's got the MIT license because that's just the one I use by default. So you guys are free to use it. No warranty, obviously. But the last thing, so I mentioned that Runway has that scheduling capability. So in the UI, if we look at a job, we can edit the schedule here. So I briefly mentioned this earlier, but I can run it. So I want to run it weekly, like let's say on a Sunday at 1 a.m. And this is UTC, so this is like, what, 7 p.m. for me? So maybe I would want to run that at like 8 a.m. You could do that here in the UI and then, set up a job to run that stale, user script, every week, which would be good, or whatever frequency you want. And in this repository, I've actually taken and I wanted to show how how powerful the SDK is. I have just defined a job in JSON, and this is something that I put together. This isn't like official. I guess I work for Runway, so I guess, is it official? Maybe it is. But this is just like a format of a job that I've expressed in JSON so that I can use the SDK to then make sure that job exists. So we've got to give it a name, all the runners that it's going to be assigned to, and since this is Active Directory specific, I'm assigning it to my domain controller. I'm building out a schedule, and this is not cron notation. I'm going to, like I said, mention that to the developers, see if we can support that. And then the actions. So this isn't just an array, all the actions I want to run. So in this case, for stale users, I'm going to run. Oh, see, this is great. Yeah, I'm going to run stale. So this is stale users. I'm going to run stale computers command. That's great. This is what happens when you copy and paste, guys. Okay. So for stale computers, I'm running the stale computers action, and then the download 80 results. I'm giving it a connection name, and this connection name already exists. And yeah, demo gods, thank you. And so this is the script. This is the beat. This really shows get ziploc to avoid stale users. Thank you, Stephen. Okay. So this script really demonstrates what you can do with the SDK or the module. Yeah, please take this keyboard away. Nice, Mike. So first, authenticate. So remember, the module is set, so you run this invoke RW login authentication, and you save the session into the runway session environmental variable. And then to actually, so if we look at this definition, I'm using plain names, but to actually change anything, you need IDs, and to get IDs, you actually have to get the item from the API. And so the API currently does not support querying a resource by its name. And so in current state, you have to get all of the items, so get all of the actions, get all of the runners, and then filter it locally for a runner with the name that matches whatever the name is. And remember, the API is kind of funky into where to actually get the items, you have to look at the items property. So I just always do a get RDW runner dot items, job dot items, connection dot items. And I mean, we can. There's no reason I can't demonstrate this. Where's my PowerShell window? There we go. So we look at runner dot items. There we go. There's all my runners. Should be 7. Yep, they're all there. Cool. And so then we load up the JSON itself. And convert it from JSON to be able to parse it. And then for each of those jobs, the first thing I'm doing here is if the job already exists, or sorry, if it does not exist, I'm going to create it. So new RW job, I can create a job. And this is a weird part with the auto rest, how the auto rest module, or sorry, the auto rest tool works, is that these is enabled and is hidden are Boolean parameters in the API. But it is created them as switch parameters in PowerShell, so you have to hard code the true or false. Yeah. And then another weird part is, so you can do a get-rw job. We can do .items, and that returns all of your jobs. But you want to get a specific job. Autorest interpreted the getting a single job as import RW job and giving it the job ID. And it does that for all the different resources. So just something to be aware of if you're going to get into the SDK. I have to get the specific job, because if you list all of them, it doesn't give you all the properties. And I'll show you some of the properties I have to reference here. So that's why I have to run the import RW job. And then for each of the runners that are in the job.runner names, so if we look here, the job.runner names, there's only one. But so for each of them, first of all, it makes sure that runner exists. And then it adds it to the group of runners that's assigned to the job. And this is where some of the nomenclature is a little confusing. So since Runway has this concept of groups being like the organization structure of devices, they decided to use the word set for a set of device runners, sorry, a set of devices or runners that's assigned to a job. So I have to get the endpoint set ID, so the group of runners that's assigned to the job, and then use the add RW set to set command to add an object to that set or that group. And I really hope I didn't confuse anybody, because I just confused myself in talking about it. And so that's where, so we're getting the existing jobs endpoint set ID and adding in the runner it found. So we filtered for that runner based on the name and the asset ID, like building a building. Yes, we're automating the automation. Okay, so we're adding the endpoints by adding it to that set. And then for each of the actions, and this one I'm going to kind of skim over. So for each of the actions, so in the JSON, I have the name of the action. All it's doing is it's seeing if that action exists. And if it does exist, it will check and see if the definition has a connection name. And if it has a connection name, then it also adds a connector to it. And then it will output the action in the correct format needed by which command is it? The set RW job action command. So it has to make this action setting request. And this will get better. I plan on having a command that's saying new RW action setting or something to where you don't have to actually put the whole fully qualified name or type of the object. But that's how it is right now. And so you need the repository action ID, which we're getting from the runner that has the matching name. So remember the name matching. And then if it's a connection, it's got to get the connector ID as well. And then it's using set RW job action to actually set the job. And this is another weird thing with auto-rest. I haven't figured out why it did this, but to a lot of these commandlets, it added an out file parameter. It doesn't actually do anything. You literally pass it a file path and it doesn't do anything with it. But like I said, the module is going to get better. This is v0.1, so just that's what it needs right now. And then the actual actions. So it's going to assign the actions, and then it creates the schedule. And this part's going to look really confusing because it's another auto rest thing. Just the way. So let's see. So the job, to update a job schedule, you have to pass it a schedule, and the schedule object itself has a schedule property. And so auto-rest just confuses them, and then I thought I could be smart and work around it, and it just made this weird mess. So you have to pass a schedule with by specifying all the properties inside of the schedule object, and then also specifying the properties as parameters on the actual commandlet. It's going to get better. That's just what it is for now. And then it actually set that job schedule. So, and this is designed to run in a workflow. So I'm actually just going to defer to the repository here and just run this workflow. And because it has the workflow dispatch, so I just go ahead and just run it. Workflow. I have to run. Thanks, David. And hey, David, before you run, you're welcome to try it out. Or I think you might have already left. Okay. So we're running this workflow, and we can look in Runway and see that we don't currently have those two jobs, but we'll give it a minute, and they should show up here. Let's go ahead and look at what this is doing. So it deploys the actions, and then it builds the jobs. Go. So I'm also using the module cacher from Chrissy Lemaire published that action. It just caches the modules for it. So here we go. It creates jobs, still users, still computers. Bam. So now if I go back to Runway, I can do they'd already picked them up. So still computers, still users. If I look here, we can see that we've got an action chain of still computers. Oh, I didn't actually push. I didn't actually push the change here. So it still says 80 still users, and it runs the still computers. It's just my fault. But here's those parameters that we looked at in the action, and the 80 results is assigned to the file server 80 results. I'm not sure why path isn't showing up there. Let me try just. There we go. That was weird. I'll have to figure out what's going on there. But yeah, and then there's our domain controller down below. So anything you can do in the UI, you can do through the Powershell SDK. Yeah, and I think that's. And I did have two features I wanted to mention that I didn't mention. Or I think I mentioned macOS supports in upcoming. But one of the other features that is actively being developed right now, and we're hoping that we're going to be pushing it this sprint, but maybe not till next, is to be able to open up a remote console to a runner. So in the UI, selecting a runner and then getting an option to open up. I can't remember if the button's going to be here, up here under Take Action, but clicking a button, being able to open up a remote console to a device where you can just interact with it, run commands. So that's it. Took a little longer than I thought. Sorry, guys.
Well, first of all, don't apologize. I hope I'm not breaking up again.
I can hear you. Oh, no, I can't hear you.
No, you can. I have someone chirping in my ear in Discord.
Oh.
You covered a ton of stuff there for a .1 product. There's a lot under the covers for people to kind of walk away and start using right now. Really, we were talking while you were presenting and saying, there's a lot you can do with this product. It seems very, very much like a simplified version of Tanium, right?
Yeah. We've had that discussion internally as well. Oh, did we lose you, Mike?
Probably did. Who knows?
Well, you're back now.
So I'm really impressed with the quality of the product for such an early stage.
Yeah, I mean, I was too when I got the first demo. I mean, and that's why I got really excited when I said out of frustration, hey, you guys have to be hiring, and they're like, well, actually. So yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to sum up for people who, how do they find the product? I know you posted the links early, but let's make sure we feature that, because that's really what you'd like people to do, is to try the product out, right?
Oh, absolutely. So the website is just runway.host, and the website is under development, so it doesn't currently have links to the portal, and so that's why in this in my repository. So for the recording, if you just go to github.com/theposhwolf/sessions, and then the research triangle on today's date, this will get to what I've been looking at here. But got links to the documentation. The portal is just portal.runway.host. And that will take you, can open this new in private, it'll take you here, and you can not runway.land. Nice.
To know Steven is to love Steven.
So that'll take you here, and you click on Enroll User. All you need is email, password, and name, and just say that you've read the terms and conditions and prove you're not a robot. I mean, the more information you put in here, the better, but don't feel like you have to. I mean, I don't put in all this information when I fill out these forms to try stuff out. But yeah, but I do want to emphasize for anyone that's made it this far, both here tonight and in the recording, that I am available for any help related to this. You can find me. I'm on Twitter. So Phil and Mike posted my Twitter account and the meeting invite. I'm on Discord. My account is TPW for the Posh Wolf. And I am on, that's specifically the PowerShell Discord. If you want to track me down on there, I'm in the PowerShell Slack. I think my name is just the Posh Wolf or Anthony Howell on the PowerShell Slack. You can shoot me an email. My email address is Anthony at runway.host. It's here. I'm trying to think of other ways. There's a lot of ways.
You should plug your website. You do have some really great content that you've written in the past.
Yeah, I do blog. That's a good point. So the poshwolf.com is my blog. My most recent post is quite hilarious. This just relates to my last job. I literally thought I was dying, but it was just stress. So, yeah, I post here occasionally. Runway.com or runway. Not to be confused with runway.com or runway.com.au. I'm not familiar with what those are. I do know there's another Runway company that does like video AI stuff. So they have a YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, search for Runway. I'll be putting up videos on YouTube for Runway, and they'll be in the documentation as well. So this documentation has a lot of stuff in it. So if you're the type of person who would rather read docs than talk to people, this is a great place to start. But again, like I wrote all these docs, so if you want to talk to somebody about it or it doesn't make sense, let me know, and I will update it and walk you through it.
So in close, maybe we could say this is a fantastic opportunity for someone to get started with a product that's at the beginning stages, and not only do you get the opportunity to use a product that is just getting started, but you can have a real impact on the development of the product feature set going forward. So if you are interested in trying something new, using something that has
Mike, you broke up there for a sec.
Work hand in hand with you to sort of tailor it to your needs, this could be a great product for you to look at for your organization.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. And that's I appreciate it, Mike. I really do want to emphasize that, you know, I'm a PowerShell person. I've been doing PowerShell for 10 years, if not a little longer. That's my background. That's what I love. I joined Runway because they want to support PowerShell folks. And that's my way of saying I really want to hear your feedback. I want to involve as many people as we can early on. The people that have, you know, the passion and really care about what they do. And I know there's people like that in the PowerShell community. And we are absolutely listening for feedback and hoping to, you know, produce a product that is a great tool to add to any PowerShell user's toolbox. And that's why we have the free community version. I mean, it's free to try. I shouldn't even say free to try. It's free to use. And we will always have a free tier. I can't guarantee that it'll always be 1,000 devices, but that's where it's at right now. And I would love for any of you all to try it.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, Anthony. And we'll talk soon. And the video will be posted pretty soon.
Cool. Yeah. And thanks again for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.